Right on.
And as usual, I'm accompanied by,
Aaron Tomlinson.
and I'm some dude with a beard and dreadlocks
And a cigar.
and a cigar. You're goddamn right.
Looks like a good one too.
It is a good one. It's a Cohiba torpedo, and it's a Cuban.
Oh,
Yeah. Don't ask, don't tell.
yeah, I was gonna say, better not put your address out there.
No, you know what? Actually, I got this when I went down to Dominican Republic, and that
Yeah.
there is an exception
Oh, nice.
now that you can bring in a few Cuban cigars.
Oh, that's good to know. I'll remember that. We're
Yep.
taking a vacation. We're taking a cruise in June, so
Oh,
hopefully
nice.
COVID doesn't come out with the, I don't know, Omega death strain or something between now and then.
So, as far as libations go, I have my fuck cup again
All
because
right.
I am the F man, and it is filled with old fashioned.
Oh, dude, you're killing me. You got an old fashioned, you got a cigar, you're sitting out in the warmth of Tulsa, Oklahoma, in your beautiful backyard.
It is a spectacular day.
Dude.
So,
Well, I'm in my house, in my regular spot with my Apothic Red. It's a red mix, but I like it. And I might drink the whole bottle tonight. It's been a week.
I could dig it. It's been a busy week. It's been nonstop for me. But it's been a good week because at the end of the week I got a sort of a attaboy from my boss, which is always
Excuse me.
bless you.
Yeah. It snuck up on me.
So and we got to come up with something else to say besides bless you when someone sneezes.
Yeah. Gesundheit.
Gesundheit. I was thinking about saying oopsie or something like that,
So Brittany says, "Hey y'all, I haven't had the best day. Cheer me up by talking about wonderful shit." Brittany,
I hate to disappoint you, Brittany.
I know. This is not the Friday. But hey,
But
phreology.
It could be. It
Yes.
could be.
Yes.
So Aaron, I'm gonna do a little bit of sharing while you set this thing up,
All right.
and because this is something that you pointed us in this direction last week.
Yeah, I did. So one of the things that's interesting for me is I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of young people. I talk to a lot of young people. I'm raising two young children, and one of the things that I tell young people today that have a lot of conflict with their parents or maybe grandparents is I tell them, you guys are living in a completely different world than what we grew up in. Completely different.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find that that my generation does with their kids is they expect them to be setting the world on fire. In other words, job, marriage, house in their early 20s. And I don't know that my generation realizes that we're immigrants to this world that kids are growing up in today. Very much immigrants. I realize that with my kids. I learn more about stuff from my children than my children learn about me as far as what the world's like today.
I agree.
And I try to, and then if I'm talking to my peers, I try to let them realize, basically when I was 23 and I moved out, I was paying $150 in rent. Now, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. $150 rent, and gas was less than $1 a gallon, I suppose. Tacos were still 49 cents at Taco Bell.
Wow.
And I was making, $35,000 a year in a retail job.
Living the dream.
Yeah. Kids today, if they can get a job like what I had, they're making $35,000 a year or less. And they're dealing with, for the same type of place that I had, over $1,000 a month rent.
Yeah.
$4 a gallon. You can't even feed a family of four cheap at fast food places anymore. I'll spend 40, 45 bucks just feeding 4 people in fast food. Of course, I got 2 growing boys, but still.
And I hate to break this to you, but it doesn't get any better.
Yeah,
Eventually you're going to hit the $50 threshold, and it's all downhill from there.
I know. And I have a master's degree, and I have to work, extra besides my regular full-time job, just to have extra to do stuff like take a vacation or do things like that. And so there's the economic disparity or changes that we see. And then technology is just out of control. I mean, social media, dealing with social media today, the way we're connected, the ability to do things like this. And then you throw in the virtual reality area that we're going into. I want to call it artificial. Artificial intelligence. That's right. I've had a long day.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I want to call it artificial intelligence, but that's not right. No, that's right. AI, self-driving cars. Where are we going to be in 5 to 10 years with technology? Where are we going to be in 5 to 10 years with virtual reality? We already have the technology, as I understand it, as I'm told by some of these college students that I work with, that the technology is already there to not only simulate reality visually and auditorily, but completely simulate reality kinesthetically as well, to where you're having the feelings and the sensations. We talked about it last week, where we may be having these types of meetings in 5 to 10 years where we're seeing each other in 3D, just like if I was sitting across from you, but not getting to share the cigar. Not that we would share, but you get my point.
You know what, though? You might be able to get the smell, the aroma.
Well, that's true.
Through the VR. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so change is happening so fast. My point in saying all of this, Derrick, is change is happening so fast we can't keep up. And this is one of the reasons I believe, that we are in a change of the ages, the age of Aquarius, I believe, regardless of what people think about that, or the science behind it, or the empirical backing to the precession of the equinox and all that, and the changing of the ages. But you can't deny there's been more change happen, even in our lifetime, than humanity had for thousands of years,
Yep.
For thousands of years, humanity had to use, fire and candles and torches, and, along came the kerosene lamp. That was a big upgrade, right? And then I remember my great grandmother, I did her funeral. She was like 102 or something when she died. She came to Colorado in a covered wagon.
Wow.
So I realized she in terms of transportation, she went from the covered wagon to the space shuttle in one lifetime. But when you look at communication, when you look at the advances of technology, when you look at the incredible amount of information, it has exploded exponentially just in our lifetime. So that tells me something's going on. There is something major that's happening in humanity that, as far as we know, unless there was really some advanced civilization sometime that got wiped out long before we know, or whatever, as far as we know, this is the most advanced and advancing and quickly advancing civilization in the history of humanity. And it's advancing so much we can't keep up, so that I feel like I'm an immigrant in the world in which I'm living. And I still feel young, And so where are we going to be in 10, 20 years? But here's the problem. Like, from my perspective, so much of this can become dehumanizing. And even the economic disparity in this country, and I blush when I say it, because I know last week I talked about the UK and the economic disparity there, and other nations that are developing nations. Someone brought up Africa. Well, what do you think about the problem of poverty in Africa? But I just know that even in the U.S., like, we are, for the most part, like ants, Derrick. Like, it's almost like, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, so please, I hope nobody gets offended at this, but it is a form of slavery, is what it feels like. You're not working to live. Most people not working to live. You're living to work.
Yeah. And
this machine, while billionaires get richer and richer, and the gap between the rich and the poor gets greater. And then with technology and what they're going to be able to do with technology, I was telling you a few weeks ago about this facial recognition technology that they have in your phone, that they're going to be able to, you think the algorithms are bad now, where you Google something, you talk about something,
Yep.
and all of a sudden it starts showing up in your ads and in your feeds, they already have facial recognition AIs that can tell what you're feeling and tell what you're thinking by reading and comparing your facial reactions. And they'll start tailoring things like political messages and advertising to your facial expressions to make it more appealing for you. So I'm just looking at this and I'm like, I want to be hopeful. I want to believe, the age of Aquarius is going to be great. I want to believe Christianity, religion in all its forms are coming down. People are getting set free. People are awakening. People are discovering their power. They're discovering the ability to, get free. That's what we're talking about on Freeology Friday. And then this flip side, I look at it and I think, but the world, I don't, and I guess every generation says this, right? But the world in some ways, to quote a phrase that's overused, is going to hell in a handbasket. Maybe.
Well, you know what? There are some things that when you look at it, you talked about like facial recognition and virtual reality and artificial intelligence and all of that. And all of that's coming. And I remember years ago, I read a book. And I can't remember the guy's first name, but his last name was Nesbitt. And the book was called Megatrends.
Yeah, I remember that book, Jim Nesbitt.
Oh my, yeah, exactly. And that book was required reading for business. And what happened with me is that when I was going through college, after getting out of the military, I minored in economics, and so this was like one of these books that was like required reading. And Nesbitt's premise was that the United States would shift from being a manufacturing-based economy to a services-based economy.
Right on.
And he said this as though it were a good thing. And this was my contention with the book then, and it's my contention with it now, is that in order to build a basis for society, the society has to be based on something. And so when we look at countries that the middle class is growing rapidly, the two that come to mind fastest are China and India.
Right.
Why is that? Because manufacturing is being largely shifted to those countries. And India, a little bit of useless trivia. Back in the 70s, Ireland as a nation decided that they would be a leader in the computer industry. And so they began to build an infrastructure to accommodate this. But they were looking at big mainframes and all of that, and call centers and all of that. So they built this out. They built out this infrastructure. And everybody said this was a really good example of developing a planned society. That there was something else that society would be based on, because manufacturing was leaving Ireland, and now they had to come up with something else. But here's what's interesting about that is that India in the late 70s, early 80s decided to model Ireland. Except by this point, the PC was coming up. And so India said that they would become a powerhouse in the development of software. They saw it. And so now the Indian economy is built largely on two things: manufacturing and information systems. That's it. So now we've basically abdicated our whole manufacturing infrastructure, and the services economy that was promised never showed up, because, ideally it would have been like, we would have been at the forefront of information services, but we're not.
Right.
That role has been abdicated to another country.
Right.
And so long and short of it is that we try to build this or someone came up with this utopian ideal.
Yeah.
That we can get rid of all the heavy lifting and all of the dirty work and all of that. And that, there's a song Donald Fagen, one of the founding members of Steely Dan, um, he made a song called IGY on his first solo album. You know, what a beautiful world this would be. What a glorious time to be free. That was the song, right? And if you listen to the lyrics of that song is like very darkly utopian. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that it was this automated society where machines would make decisions and it would create more leisure for artists, right? But that promise was never fulfilled. And so anyway, let me say one more thing before I shut up and kick the can back to you.
Sure.
I read something recently. There was an article, and I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about millennials
Mm-hmm.
and how there's a frame of thought among millennials that I don't want to be ambitious. I just want to be attractive. And when you look at the social media scene, TikTok, Instagram, it's all about this physical beauty. It's all about the smoking hot body. It's all about the food you eat and the places you go and all of that. And so all of that, if you were able to do that, if you had time to do that and also be productive in some way, that would be somewhat utopian.
Yeah.
But basically, the whole concept of work, of productivity, of innovation, of invention, all of that has been cast aside for the sole purpose of just I just want to be pretty. I want to be handsome. I want to be desired by the opposite or the same sex.
Wow.
Right? So here we have what all of the framework for a utopian society. And here's an well, I'll save that because we're going to talk about money and wealth distribution, because that is a really big thing. But I'll stop here by saying that right now we have all of the trappings, all of the framework, everything that we need for a truly utopian society, and yet we seem to be tilting toward, not even pressing in, but we're on the slippery slope, sliding like a champion skier into dystopia.
Well, and I think here's the key for me. When we're talking about utopia or dystopia, we're talking about society. And
Right.
what is society? Society is human beings living together. So to oversimplify things, maybe a working definition, it's definitely not a scholarly or a technical or even a Googled definition of utopia or dystopia, but living together well, utopia, right?
Yep.
Living together not well, dystopia. But the key is society or social interactions. And this is where technology and information and stuff like this maybe is a bit of a danger for us. I remember reading years ago a book by, it was either by Daniel Goleman or by his wife. You know, Daniel Goleman was the guy that came up with emotional intelligence. Well, he didn't come up with it, but he wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence. And it was either him or his wife, or maybe they co-authored a book called Social Intelligence.
I remember the book.
Yeah. And one of the things that happens in interactions is it's necessary. Your brain is actually wired through thousands of years of evolution for direct social contact, which means that you have aspects of your brain that's able to pick up on facial expressions specifically, body language, presence, energy. I mean, you know the difference. Like, I don't know, Derrick, I'm sure you've talked to somebody over Zoom, and it's good and you get a sense of their energy, but when you're in their presence, they carry They carry an energy. They light up the room.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And so there's this sort of intuitive, almost unconscious connection that we have with each other that fosters empathy and keeps us in check with one another. Messaging, social media, texting, email, Snapchatting, that component is missing. And so what they've done studies now to show that social media, texting and all that stuff fosters narcissism. And the one key thing that narcissists are missing is empathy. And so it's almost as though we're creating a society
Mm-hmm.
where we're not going to live together well if we're not careful. And look at the results. I mean, people are ugly to each other. In public, people are terrible to service workers. I complain sometimes about service, but I get it. I get why sometimes you get crappy customer service, because people have to go out and face the angry horde every day and they get paid crap, to keep these companies going and in business. But, and you and I have talked about this off air, sorry, I just thought about the slap heard around the world.
Yeah.
But, maybe we need to bring back, and I'm not advocating for this, but, there was a day that you would watch what you said to someone because you might get punched in the mouth. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And I think that social media, not just social media, but the whole online ecosystem has created this fearless space, where you figure you can say whatever you want because there's no danger of you getting hit in the mouth.
Right. And not only that, but there's no consequences.
Right.
I grew up in a smaller community, and so how you were perceived in that community was important. So maybe there wouldn't be physical consequences, but there would be some kind of social consequences, where you could be alienated, or if you were in business or doing something, you could be, there were economic consequences and things like that. And I'm not talking about being sued. I'm talking about people wouldn't patronize your business. People wouldn't hire you. You get a bad reputation,
or people wouldn't socialize with you. You'd be shunned.
Right. And some of those consequences, I think, helped us. I mean, one of the best things that happened to me, to be honest, in high school, some of those social consequences helped me grow.
Yeah.
Helped me change, helped me bring out my better self. Helped me learn people skills, because if I was acting a goof or whatever, and my friends called me out or pointed it out, anyway, I could go on and on about that, but I think you get my point. Like, if it's the whole point of dystopia, utopia is, are we living together well, or are we living together poorly? And I think the environment right now has really degraded. And I'll say one more thing. Like, who would have ever thought that there would be a social construct, a social groupthink, where you could watch a guy on TV, like George Floyd, be blatantly, smugly
executed,
while the guy knows he's being recorded. And I understand when people say, well, this happened all the time. The only difference now is it's being caught on camera. But here's my point. It's caught on camera. Like, we can all see it.
Yeah.
And who would have thought that the phrase Black Lives Matter, and I understand that it predates that, but there for about 2 weeks, there was a worldwide movement.
Yep.
For
worldwide.
Black Lives Matter. It was worldwide. Demonstrations all over. And within a matter of weeks, or whatever the time frame was, I forget, people would come back with, well, all lives matter.
Yeah. And
I
you
don't
know,
even know what to say to that.
here's the deal. There are always what I call pivotal moments
Hmm.
in society, pivotal moments in history, where something happens where the narrative could tilt toward utopia or dystopia. And let me say this because there's a document that I shared with you, and I'm not going to read
Yeah.
the whole thing, but I want to read this because this is really important, and people need to understand this. It's like the characteristics of a utopian society. Number one, peaceful, benevolent government. In other words, honestly, the government that governs least governs best, but the government that governs on behalf of all the people and not just the few governs
Right.
best.
Right.
And that's a big distinction because it's like conservatives talk about limited government, but in reality, they're totally opposed to that. But let me keep going here because the next point is seminal. Equality for citizens. Equality for listen, here's the thing. If we cannot all agree that it doesn't matter whether we are female or male, black or white, straight, gay, bisexual, transgender, that that we that we speak one language or the other, that all human beings have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we can't agree on that basic premise, utopia is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I used to love the whole Star Trek universe,
Yeah.
from the 1960s television show to the 80s movies to the 90s reboot, The Next Generation, and all
Yeah.
the subsequent shows. It's like Star Trek is all about how do we get all people together. Now, of course, in order to have a dramatic pull, there's a lot of bullshit that's written into the script, right? A lot of warfare, a lot of conflict, a lot of strife that has to be written in because unfortunately that's what people relate to.
Yeah.
But let me go on because this next point, this is like equality for citizens is one, this is the other. Access to education, healthcare, employment, and so
I mean,
forth. These are quality of life issues. And,
they
and,
are.
and, we cannot talk about equal opportunity if there is not equal access.
Mm-hmm.
Because I pointed this out before, and you guys can, you watching, listening, you can go ahead and back and check this out for yourself. But the big difference between the credit scores of black people and the
Mm.
credit scores of white people is generally around collections around healthcare, because blacks are typically underinsured, and because of a lot of the inherent racism in society, there's a lot of healthcare that doesn't get offered to minorities, right? So with that, what happens is that instead of having insurance, instead of having a regular doctor, what black folks do is they try to hang on the best way they can economically, and when shit hits the fan, they go to the emergency room. And if you've ever been to the emergency room, you know how much that costs. It's like your insurance, they paint a pretty picture for you if you have insurance that says, oh, well, you just have to pay $100 and we pick up the rest, but they don't. Because if you have to have any tests, if you have to have an MRI, if you have to have a CT scan, if you have to have anything beyond basic services, now you're getting into some serious money, and your insurance largely won't cover it. So what will happen is you get medical bills of thousands of dollars that you are not prepared to pay.
Yeah.
Okay. But let me keep going because there are two more points that I have to cover here. Citizens are free to think independently. Stop right there.
Mm.
Because on the one hand, one of the things where conservatives have it right is that mainstream media does actually try to influence groupthink and get people on the same sheet of music. Now, listen, there's nothing wrong with being on the same sheet of music as long as that sheet of music has a melody that benefits all. But when that independent or when that group think marginalizes one group or exalts one group over another, that's not independent thought. And so what happens is that when anybody says anything outside of that paradigm, now it's like, oh, well, you're just a rebel, you're a malcontent, or you're a communist. I remember when I was in the Navy, this was during the height of the Cold War, that if you had anything to do with the Communist Party, that was cause for you to be drummed out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were taught that communism was evil. Well, no, it's like you have to go back and look at everything in context. Yes, the way Stalin manifested communism, yeah, that was pretty bad. The way Mao manifested communism was bad, and certainly Kim Il Jong and North Korea, certainly that was horrible. But that none of that has. It has almost no relation to what Marx and Engels wrote in Das Kapital, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, when somebody calls me a communist now, I laugh because I say, you think that's a fucking insult. I'm off active duty now, so I can think freely. I can think independently. And the last thing here, a safe, favorable environment. Safe means that even if you break the law, there's due process, and that you should have the opportunity to have your case tried before a jury of your peers. You should not be in fear of being executed publicly unless now if you are causing a clear and present threat to other human life,
right,
then by all means, you roll the dice, you move your mice. That's your, you just cast your lot, right? But if you ostensibly pass off a fake $20 bill, that is not a capital offense in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So
ridiculous.
All of these things, and here's the thing. This is funny. Like types of utopian guiding principles. One at the top of the list, religious beliefs, and so when you look at like Amish and Shaker communities, they ostensibly have this egalitarian society, but it's not really egalitarian toward women, and it certainly is inconsiderate of anyone outside the group. Humanism, on the one hand, is good, that we stress the value and goodness of human beings and strive to respect everyone and view all as equals.
Yeah.
And then there are others like science and technology, economics, and ecology. All of these things that basically, if we, let me tell you something. I'm gonna, spoiler alert. This is the conversation in a nutshell. Spoiler alert. It's that the reason why we can't have a utopian society is because we can't agree on what these things actually look like. What does peaceful, benevolent government look like? Mm-hmm. Is it what the Democrats offer, or is it what the Republicans offer? Is it capitalistic or socialistic? Equality for citizens, do all lives really matter? Because if all lives really matter, Black Lives Matter would not be a thing.
Right.
And then education, healthcare, employment. It's like if you are a German citizen, you have access to education as long as you choose to pursue it, and you have health care as long as you are alive, and while you don't have guaranteed employment, you do have plenty of opportunity.
Mhm.
And then, you know, this whole thing about thinking independently, this is one of the things when you start getting into theocracy, and this is why I don't think religious
Gonna-
beliefs should have anything to do with utopia.
Right.
Because the minute you introduce a belief system and you say, okay, everybody who believes this is good, they're in God's grace, they're going to heaven, yada yada yada, right? And everybody that isn't, they're going to hell, they're worthy of death, they're worthy of shunning or whatever, right? That the thing is that we don't agree on any of these things.
Right.
But anyway, back over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, there's so much there to unpack from what you said. You know, first off, I wanted to comment on, because I knew you'd go there. The free thought, groupthink is a real problem. Groupthink prevents us from living together well, because if you think differently, then you're not a part of the group. But I thought this was, and religious groupthink is the word finally endorsed. Well, the word of the Lord said, God said. So who are you? I mean, I got to the point when I was a pastor really early on that I taught people never say the Lord told me, because the Bible says, here's how I did this, Derrick. The Bible says the wise seek counsel. In the multitude of counselors, there is safety. There is some truth to that, unless that multitude is just groupthink, right? You want to beware the naked man who offers you a shirt. Like, you want to make sure you're getting wise counsel. That's the first thing. But I would tell people, the moment you say the Lord told me, that's the end of the argument. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, if the Lord told you, you know, why the hell are you talking to me? I have nothing to say.
Or that the printed word of the Lord has some final authority.
Well, yeah, or in maybe another situations, tradition. And so I had to look up this quote because I love this quote. You know, tradition, the authority of tradition. Laura Greenwood, who wrote some vampire novel, The Vampire Detective, she said, tradition is peer pressure from dead people.
I never knew who said that, but that's been one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, and that really is all it is. And that's the worst, because you don't even know them. You don't even know what kind of person they were. So there is that. I mean, so if we're gonna think realistically and envisioning utopia according to what you were covering there, then groupthink has to go out the window, and divinely endorsed groupthink has to go out the window, and tradition endorsed groupthink has to go out the window, and that would include maybe the Constitution.
Well, we've talked about that before, so that's you know.
Maybe I should have put that softer, but
no, that's perfect, because honestly, we're at a point where we really need to rethink the Constitution and possibly rewrite it.
And I just want to say, like, I have more empathy for some reason today for my conservative brethren than I may have had in the past. And just think about this realistic with me for a minute. Like, if you get triggered at that thought, oh my God, you know, throw out the Constitution. The Constitution was written essentially for 13 colonies. It was written for a group of people that were using muskets. It's certainly, they couldn't even envision a world that we're living in today. They couldn't even envision, quote unquote, and I hate this term, but I'm gonna use it because people know what I'm referring to, manifest destiny. Mm-hmm. They couldn't even envision that, much less the world we're living in today. So we're holding on to antiquated things that are completely antiquated.
But let me say something on behalf of the founding fathers, right? That they did envision the Constitution as a living document. They never envisioned this as to be graven in stone and that this is the be all to end all. They knew that society was going to change. That if this American experiment, if it were to be successful, that there would be changes, or there would have to be an accommodation to change built in.
Yeah, and that so the living document was there to support a governmental system that they envisioned would be able to bear the weight of the change of society as it occurred. I don't think they ever thought about it as like it is written.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
In other words, we're doing this to establish human beings. Their faith in humanity maybe was a little, I don't know. Human beings can figure this out, and this is the best way we can envision that they can do that. So there's that aspect of it. But I want to, if I can, I want to speak to, because you said something that just really struck a chord in me. An idea that's been growing in my heart, not just my mind, is this idea of healthcare as how can you have any kind of society when healthcare is such an issue? I mean, when you're talking about that, and I understand the disparities, Derrick, because I've seen the statistics and I understand, at least intellectually how that works. But I got to tell you, dude, I'm telling you right now, with what I pay for insurance and what my insurance covers, if I had a major health crisis, if one of us had a major health crisis, it would bankrupt us.
Yep.
And that's just because of the cost of healthcare. That's just because of the system, the way the system is rigged. And people, help me understand this. If you're out there, you're probably not watching this. If you're out there and you're very conservative on this issue, but help me understand something.
Let me throw something out there while you're gathering that thought, and it's this: that every year, on average, 600,000 people go bankrupt because of healthcare.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yep.
So help me understand. If you're on the other side of this issue, which I know, I'm just speaking hypothetically, I want people to explain to me how you manage to equate a single payer healthcare system or government funded healthcare or healthcare for all or socialized medicine, how you equate that with socialism as a whole. And you blow the trumpet for capitalism as though everything in society is a capitalistic venture. So public education is paid for by the state. Your police department is paid for by the state. If you want, go back and read your history. There's a great documentary. I can't remember what platform it's on, but it talks about the men who built America. Mm-hmm. And it talks about the Andrew Carnegie's and and one of the things that I learned watching that documentary was that before there was a police department, you had to buy your own police, basically. So the wealthy, who was the steel guy? Was that
Andrew Carnegie?
Yeah, that was Carnegie.
Carnegie, yeah. Because I know the series, I know it well.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was him or someone else, but he was working people to death in these factories,
and he had his own police force.
And he brought in his own police force that gunned them down. So I mean, we can talk about problems with police and whatever, but that's government funded. Your fire department's government funded. I mean, if the house starts to burn down, you don't expect the neighbors to get their buckets out. Your roads are maintained by government funding. And so these are all things that are designed to make our lives better, to make our lives easier.
Military.
Military is the greatest socialist institution in America.
It is.
So how is it that adding healthcare to that list of community benefits is bad? How is it that adding healthcare to that list of community benefits is anti-capitalism? How is it that adding healthcare for all to that list of community benefits that our taxes pay for is somehow makes us communists and evil? And you touched on that earlier, but I'm using their rhetoric, right? How does that work in your mind and your thinking? How can you be anti-healthcare for all and pro-military when military is a socialistic system? And then how does that work your thinking for you guys. Go ahead, Derrick.
Oh no, I'm just
I kind of lost my train of thought.
no. Well,
It's
you know
been
what?
happening to me a lot today.
Let me say this about that, because I'm sitting in the backyard of my home, whose mortgage is guaranteed by the Veterans Administration.
Hmm.
Because of my service,
Yeah.
I am entitled to a no down payment, low interest loan, which is allowing me to build wealth for my family. And there's more, because I am a service connected disabled veteran. My health care, see, I have insurance, but my insurance is for my family. I don't use insurance.
Right.
I use the VA medical system.
Right.
And it is totally paid for. The only thing I pay for out of my VA benefit are my prescription drugs. That's it. And what I pay is a pittance compared to what these things would be on the economy.
I found my, thanks, Derrick. I found my train of thought. So people will argue, well, who's going to pay for that? Our tax dollars are going to pay for that. You have no fucking clue what your tax dollars pay for, because you can't keep up. We can't keep up. But because I started paying attention to where our tax dollars went. Like, do you sit there and watch C-SPAN all day long, or do you just listen to Sean Hannity? Like, who's going to pay for that? Do you realize what we've paid for? Do you realize it was easier to get money sent to the Ukraine? And I'm not saying we shouldn't have done this, but it was easier to get billions of dollars sent to the Ukraine in aid than it was to help business owners during the pandemic. Like, do you remember some congressional meeting when they bailed out Ford? Do you remember some congressional meeting when just before the pandemic, they put billions of dollars into the stock market to stabilize oil companies like Chevron and oil companies like Exxon? That happened just a few weeks or months before that.
Hang on, because you're hitting on a really big point here, right? Because this is something that, like, utopian societies, when you look at the Nordic countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, right? They have this basically cradle to grave welfare system. Some of them have guaranteed basic income. Right. In other words, you get a check just for being a citizen. Okay, and you say, okay, well, that seems to be counterproductive. But what that does is, like let's say if you're a young person just coming out of college and you're just trying to figure life out, there's no pressure being put on you to suddenly, be this productive member of society. You're given time to figure it out. And then also that America is the only major industrialized country that does not have universal basic health care. And yet health care is more expensive for us than anyone else. In other words, not just what we pay, but what the government pays.
Oh, let me get off on this. So people on the far right, the extreme right, QAnon people especially, or during the pandemic, we can't trust the big pharmaceutical companies. But and listen, I think big pharma is horrible. Yes. I think they're profiting and making billions of dollars off of killing people. Somebody commented, I didn't see who it was, but it's cheaper to kill people than to take care of them.
Sandra Whitley.
Okay, yeah, but so we can't trust big pharma. Big pharma is corrupt, and yet when the argument comes, okay, then let's look at the government taking over healthcare. Oh, no. We got to have scientists that are working on breakthroughs, and they'll lose their ambition because capitalism rewards, the brilliant. It rewards genius. I mean, I've heard these arguments on conservative talk radio. No offense, Derrick. I've heard these arguments on. No, I'm teasing you.
No. Carry on,
because I know that's your background. I'm just messing with you, but I've heard these arguments. Like, are you serious right now? Like, do you not realize you are holding two totally contradictory beliefs at the same time and thinking it's logical and thinking that it works? Like, explain that to me. Explain to me how you can be against government funded healthcare because pharmaceutical companies will quit making breakthroughs, but then
Yeah.
be against these big pharmaceutical companies that are ripping us off and putting weird stuff in the vaccines and all that stuff. You can't have it both ways. And then finally, last thing I'm going to say, because this really gripes me, man. It took months. I think it's criminal. Like, this is the other side of it, right? I think it's criminal that you shut down people's businesses, barbers, gyms, personal trainers, restaurants, some of the biggest ones to suffer during the pandemic, right? I mean, think about it. Barbers, hairstylists. You know, I knew people that were compassionate enough that they were sending their monthly or weekly, whatever, money to their hairstylist, because even though they weren't getting their hair cut, you know,
they knew they depended on it.
But so how can the government tell you to shut down your business and then take months to decide that they're going to send you a, what do they call that thing?
A stimulus.
A stimulus check, and they send you $600 freaking dollars when they'll send billions of dollars overseas, trillions of dollars into the industrial war complex, and you don't even know. Like there's got to be this huge, sorry, Derrick, but there's got to be this huge congressional gathering, and oh my God, and all this argument and all this, I don't know, fucking Ted Cruz reading another Dr. Seuss book on the floor of the Senate or something to
Ted Cruz, by the way,
work the filibuster, when all these other pieces of legislation where money's just getting tossed out, and they do it in a heartbeat, and you know nothing about it. Not you.
Now, let me say this. A couple of things.
All right,
one
go, bud.
is that like people talk about welfare, and they get their draws in a bunch over welfare, right? And for every $1 in cash transfer payments to individuals, $3 are being sent to corporations. Corporate welfare is the biggest expenditure outside of military in this
Explain
country.
that. Explain what you mean by that. Corporate welfare or corporate. I've heard people say corporate welfare, corporate socialism, and I think for some people it flies right over their head. So explain that.
Okay. So corporate welfare, corporate socialism, right? In other words, like look at the recession, the recent recession. Was it 2008, 2009 when we had the financial apocalypse, right? There was a bailout called TARP, TARP, and I don't remember exactly what TARP stands for, but what this was a bailout for the banks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was under the premise that the banks are too big and too strategically important to fail. So in other words, there was money allocated by your tax dollars through the Congress to prop up these banks. Meanwhile, now watch this, right? 2008, 2009 introduced a shift in the housing market that we still haven't recovered from. More people lost their homes during that period than even in the pandemic, right? And instead of the government bailing out these homeowners so that they could keep their homes, they bailed out the banks so the banks could take the homes of the home. I'm like,
that's a perfect example. And here's what it's called, TARP, by the way. I looked it up. The Troubled Asset Relief Program. What about the Troubled Family Relief Program?
Yeah. I mean,
and they have to meet, and then they say, well, who's going to pay for it? Nobody asked who was going to pay for this. Nobody asks who's going to pay for the next, multi-million-dollar missile that they're going to fire. Nobody asked.
During the pandemic, the airlines went to the government with their hat in their hand.
Thank you. Yes.
Asking for relief. And the government said, okay, here's some money.
And you know what the result of that is? Now the airlines treat you as a customer like crap.
Well, the funny thing is that from someone who is a million miler,
yeah,
the airlines have always treated you like crap.
Yeah.
Listen, you don't,
because you're not their source.
You don't get treated like anything special until you hit like gold or platinum status.
That's
on an
true.
airline. Other than
Very
that,
true.
you are a commodity.
Very true. Very true.
So and again, this whole thing about utopia, and let me say this.
Yeah, we
I
kind
got
of got off track, didn't
yeah.
we?
Let me go back to I'm going to go back to the document for just a quick second here,
Yeah.
because so here we talked about utopia. What is a utopia? And now let's talk about the characteristics of a dystopian society. And you need to really process this, folks. You need to
Yeah.
process this, because this is hitting you where you live, right? Watch this. Characteristics of a dystopian society: propaganda replaces education and is used to control the citizens of society. And here's the funny thing, is that conservatives will say critical race theory.
I was
Critical
just
race
going to
theory.
go there. I'm so
God
glad you
damn it,
brought that up.
you can't teach that because that's wrong. No, listen, there is a negative aspect to how this country was founded, how this country prospered, and how it continues to operate. That needs to be taught, because if you don't teach that, then people will think, just like somebody was saying that, okay, like you look at somebody like Bill Gates, right? I didn't know this, and I'm a pretty sharp guy. Bill Gates's mother was the president of the United Way. And she made a plea to IBM to start using MS-DOS as their operating system. Bill Gates had help. For those of you who don't know, Bill Gates is William Henry Gates III, and William Henry Gates Jr. and William Henry Gates Sr. were all Harvard educated lawyers. The Gates family is attorneys. And so Bill Gates benefited from his family connections. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. People say, oh, well, Jeff Bezos just pulled himself up by his bootstraps. No, Amazon was on the brink of failure until his parents kicked in almost $300,000 in loans to him. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, these guys were from upper middle class families. They had the help of their parents. And on and on. Elon Musk's father was a emerald miner in South Africa, or he owned emerald mines. Not an emerald miner, he owned the mines. And here's the other thing. Elon Musk's mother was a supermodel, which kind of explains a little bit about him, and his sexual proclivities. Okay. But the thing is that Elon Musk didn't just start from nothing.
Right.
Larry Ellison did not start from nothing. All of these people, to say that if you just have pluck, if you just have moxie, if you just have determination and that bold pioneer spirit, that somehow you're going to make something out. No, it doesn't work that way. If you don't have somebody backing you, someone who believes in you, and someone who's going to back that belief up with real dollars, you could kiss your dream goodbye. But let me keep going here, right? So we talked about propaganda. Information, independent thought, and freedom are restricted. Let me tell you something. One of the things that came out of 9/11 was a restriction in personal freedom. That the government now was able to tap phone lines and listen into conversations and read people's mail and all this other stuff under the auspices of protecting the homeland. And again, independent thought. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to talk about me so I don't piss anybody off. But me, I was hip deep in mainstream theology.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was hip deep in this way of thinking, I was celebrated as someone who helped to advance the cause of Christianity. But the moment that I began to veer away from that, I became a pariah. As did you, Aaron. As did you.
Yeah.
You know, so here we have freedom restricted, independent thought restricted, and information restricted. So the thing is, people talk about Google, right, as if it were a bad thing. Google has no skin in the information game as to what information is being put out. All they are is an information broker. They make it available, you consume it. That's it.
Right.
But let me keep going here. Citizens are perceived to be under constant surveillance. This is where the QAnon people have it right. And understand, my grandfather used to always say a broken clock is right twice a day. But watch this. My grandfather, this is exactly how he said it. He said, because we had a clock that my grandmother had bought, right? And it was an electric clock, and it had a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Robert Kennedy, and JFK on it, right?
Wow.
And sometime around the time that my grandmother died in 1971, that clock stopped working. Did my grandfather take it down? No, because my grandmother put that up. And that was something that he was holding on to. But that clock was wrong. It was wrong most of the time. It was only right twice a day. And this is what my grandfather would say. He said, a broken clock is right twice a day. He said, but that motherfucker's not qualified to teach you anything.
Ooh.
That's what he would say. I mean, he said it exactly like that. So constant surveillance. We believe that someone is listening to our phone calls, and it has been proven that the NSA has a program called Echelon that actually listens to phone calls. Now, it's kind of benign. It's looking for specific text strings, right? And based on those text strings, some artificial intelligence will kick in and make some decisions about what to do about it. But yes, you know, if you're in any major city in America, at every traffic light, there's a camera. Now, they stopped doing the cameras that took pictures of you running the light because they said, well, that's a little invasive. But the cameras are still there in case someone commits a crime, and they can go back to that footage, right? So yes, citizens are perceived to be under constant surveillance. That is a true fact. We are under constant surveillance. Citizens have a fear of the outside world, immigration, xenophobia, anything different, right? Anything that is not traditionally American is not trusted, right? The next one, this one here, process this carefully, folks. Citizens live in a dehumanized state.
Come on, man.
A dehumanized state, in other words, where the value of some humans are elevated above others. The next one, the natural world is banished and distrusted. In other words, you know, let me say this. The other day, my blood pressure went high, and I take medication for blood pressure, but for some reason, sometimes, even in spite of the medication, even in spite of watching what I eat, in spite of all that, it'll spike, right? So what do? I take a glass of apple cider vinegar and cinnamon, and it brings my blood pressure down. Now, the thing is that any doctor or anybody in mainstream medicine, they'll say, oh, well, you know, apple cider vinegar may have benefits, but you know, that what happened to you was probably psychosomatic. And it isn't, because it's repeatable. Anytime I take apple cider vinegar and cinnamon and some water, it's going to lower my blood pressure. And the last thing, citizens conform to uniform expectations individually, and dissent are banned. God damn it. It's, you know, when you say Black Lives Matter, there's something wrong with you. you're anti-American. You have to conform to what the established norms of society are. You have to, this has to be your thing.
Yeah.
And then watch this. Types of dystopia controls. At the top is corporate control. I watched a documentary, matter of fact, just last night about Coca-Cola and how Coca-Cola has essentially taken over the world. And how Coca-Cola used the US government during World War II because sugar was rationed. Coca-Cola lobbied the government to say that Coca-Cola was a national trust and needed this ration of sugar. And that they went to the US government and said that if we create Coca-Cola bottling plants around the world, we can promote Americanism, American ideals, American beliefs. And so the government, the US government, this is your tax dollars at work, folks, subsidize Coca-Cola bottling globally. And that there are only 2 countries, only 2 in the world that do not have a Coca-Cola bottling plant. And they are North Korea and Cuba.
North Korea. I would have guessed North Korea. I didn't know.
North Korea and Cuba.
So basically what you've done eloquently, exquisitely, is made the case that we already live in a dystopia. And I think that might be true. So, but then that, like, I don't want to end on a bummer note, but I went into this, like, growing in real time is something we talk about all the time, right?
Yep.
So I went into this thinking we were at some kind of neutral zone. It's funny how the mind works, right? It's funny how you conceptualize things without facts. Your mind still needs to make sense of something.
Yeah.
And this is where we get in trouble, by the way. Like, your mind wants to make sense, so it fills in the gaps where you don't have information, where you don't have facts. It fills in the gaps for you. So I was approaching this, Derrick, if I'm honest, from this idea that we're at some kind of neutral, like we're at some kind of, tipping point. And I'm an eternal optimist. I really am. I don't sound like it maybe on the program, and I know you are.
Yeah,
I know you are. But I just want to let the people out there know that. And so in my mind, humanity is getting progressively better, and there is a trajectory, even though it may not be as fast as we want, that's moving us towards more utopian type societies. And so I'm approaching this almost from the standpoint that we're, maybe leaning one way or whatever. But honestly, Derrick, I think you made the case for the fact that we already do live in a dystopia for most people.
Yeah.
And the structure of it. And so then the question becomes what we as individuals do or can do to thrive. Listen, to thrive in the midst of a dystopia for our personal lives. And is it possible that if enough of us awaken, if enough of us, I don't know, I don't even know what it is we need to do, but what can we do to
can
you understand where I'm going?
Can I give people a peek into our personal conversations?
Sure, of
our
course.
Offline conversations?
Of course.
Just this one, right? If you look at things at the quantum level, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and you look at a quantum artifact according to the standard model, whether it be a boson, a lepton, or whatever, right? That the mere fact that you observe it changes its behavior. And that you can, because of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you can determine the position of a thing, but not the velocity, or you can determine the velocity, but not the position, right? There is something that you just don't know, and you won't know, right? So now we're reduced to probability. So here's the thing: if that is true, then that means if I look at an electron, that the mere fact that I look at this electron, that's influencing its behavior. But every atomic or every atom has electrons. Everyone has at least one. Hydrogen has one, right? So the mere fact that I observe this electron changes something about its behavior. So what that means is that so how is it then that I'm able to look at things like the wood behind me and know that that's wood? How am I able to look at this computer and know that this is a computer? How am I able to look at you, Aaron, and know that you're Aaron? Because if I look at what makes you up, the mere fact that I look at it is influencing something in it. Now, this is our conversation.
Right.
That the reason why it manifests a certain way is because we agree on it. Agreement causes the wave function to collapse into something that's tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why I'm optimistic, because right now we're agreeing on what's fucked up.
Right.
If you ask anybody to, what do you think about what's going on in the world? They'll say, oh man, it's fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
That's where we are. That's the conclusion that we've reached. But what if we were to say, and I'm not saying to say this just to, like name it and claim it kind of thing, not we take a different version of the prosperity gospel, but if we were to say, no, this is actually good. And let me explain why it's good. That and that's why I think what we do here on Phreology Friday is so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're doing is we're changing the agreement narrative. So if we say, okay, this is a dystopia, this is fucked up, we agree on that. But if we say, what if we were to do this instead of that?
Right.
And agree on the good.
Right.
Now, if we do that, then we actually change. Mm-hmm. Basically, we cause the wave function to collapse onto the good instead of the bad.
Right.
And that, I think, so you said, okay, I made the case for a dystopian society, and yes, I have. But that's not the end of the story, folks.
Right, exactly.
You and I have not only the ability, but also the responsibility to change it.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the things that we've been taught, socialism bad, capitalism good, single payer medicine bad, competition good, that we have to actually get to the point where we say, okay, what can we agree on that produces a greater good? And if we can agree on that, then right now we've tipped. We're past the tipping point. We tipped into dystopia. But the thing is, that's the bad news. The good news is that we could tip it back. Mm-hmm. We could set it right. This is our responsibility. And that's what I have, man.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that's a good place to end, man. Honestly, I don't even want to add to that. I don't want people to walk away from this like Brittany. I need a good word tonight. I don't want people to walk away from this depressed or hopeless or defeated. And I think you did a great job of explaining how, like, we can make a difference in this.
Yeah.
And we can affect more change than we realize that we can affect, because change begins at the quantum level, and it begins with agreement.
Come on.
and I just can't do that. So.
Come here. Something pissed my dog off.
I don't want to piss your dog off ever.
No, he's a sweetheart, but he sees something that, and it's funny, like, people walk their dogs through the neighborhood, and so we have a gate on one side of the house. It's like an RV gate, and so he could see through there, and there was a lady that had her dog, and her dog was about to take a dump in that part of our yard, and he saw it and he started barking. And that dog stopped doing what he was doing and moved on. It's like my dog is like, don't shit in my yard.
Yeah.
So anyway, with all that being said, we want to know what you think, and
Right.
this is a really good one. I mean, somebody somewhere ought to be chiming in on this. Because this is really powerful stuff here. You listen, you who are watching this, you have more power than you think.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. People think that they're powerless. They think that they have no ability to change things. They say, well, that's just the way it is. Or it is what it is. No, that's not is what it is. I'm going to tell you something. Stop saying that. And I'm guilty because I'll say it sometimes. Well, it is what it is. No, it's not. It is what you make it. It is what you choose it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing to make that change, then you can change it. So anybody who wants to join in the conversation, please feel free. And I think my cigar is about done.
Well, that's perfect timing. How's your old fashioned? That was a big cup of old fashioned there, Derrick.
Yeah, I drank a lot, Aaron. I have a nice buzz right now.
I got to be honest with you. I've only drank. I don't know if you can see where the bottle is.
Oh yeah, about half bottle.
But I'm quite buzzed myself. Yeah. I have to be honest. I'm feeling it.
I know. One of the things I'm gonna do now that I've kind of settled in and everything. I'm gonna get my medical card again, because I'm gonna tell you, I had no idea how much marijuana helped PTSD until I started. And it's funny, like when I was younger, I used to smoke it recreationally, but now I smoke with a purpose, and it actually helps.
Yeah, there's a lot of medicinal benefits to.
Yeah. Sandra said, y'all are tooted. Hey, you goddamn right, Sandra.
Yeah, I think so.
Go through the comments here and see, because I saw some good stuff here. And
yeah, there's lots of good stuff in here.
And for the record, let me just say this too, to kind of set things up for next week, because I think that next week is the week that we're supposed to have Ben Urban on.
Yes.
So next week will be Ben Urban, and Ben, you get to pick the topic because you're the guest. You pick the topic, and we ride shotgun.
So Brittany says, I'm doing my daughter's hair, but gonna take a good swig of something later.
No, listen, if you want
I'm only laughing because she said I had a rough day, I need something good. And we drove her to drink, Derrick.
Well, that's good. That's good. We want to drive people to libations and mind altering things.
Exactly.
But yeah, Brittany, have the drink now, and your daughter's hair will be very, very creative.
Yes, I'm sure your daughter appreciates that you're doing it after, Brittany. That's great.
Ben chimed in with a little bit of sarcasm here. He said the dividing line between Utopia and Dystopia is Jesus Christ. whose sky dad, the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, all benevolent God, couldn't come up with anything better to bring us to him than to humiliate, torture, and murder his son.
It is Good Friday.
Talk about a fucking winner. Yes, it is Good Friday.
It is Good Friday. Thank you, man. Oof. Ugh. Ugh. Isn't that just icky now? You just think about that and you're just like, ugh. Ugh.
Well, you know, it's like the whole thing about Good Friday. Good Friday doesn't work mathematically anyway.
I know.
Yeah, but that's another thing.
Don't talk about that. The family doesn't talk about those secrets.
So Tender Anna Hart, she says, been looking for you guys. Well, now you found us. So here we are. Brittany's like, I don't want them that deep in my business talking about the government.
Yeah. What are you up to, Brittany? See, I take the opposite approach, Derrick. I figure the government's bored with me, man. I mean, they aren't going to they don't give a shit what I'm doing.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing that I believe, and I don't say it's the government per se, but maybe people in the government that don't want people who are off the reservation. I mean, it's the whole Matrix thing.
True. That's
right?
True.
Steve Clausen says his son-in-law owns a tech company. He lives in Minnesota, 300 employees, about 20 in New York and 250 in India. Interesting thing. I changed jobs recently, and the company that I work for is based in the UK. And it's a company that its Indian resource load is relatively small for an IT firm. And I don't have anything against Indians per se, because a lot of my best friends are from India. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, just really wonderful people. But that's one of those things. So Jeanette says, we do at Utopia because it seems like we move backward. Yeah. I mean, listen, dystopia is backward. It's regressing. It's not progressive. It's something where we're, and that's why a lot of people get mad at me, but I say this is that people say, you know, you have conservatives and you have liberals. And if you look at it in that framework, it's like conservatives are conserving something. Well, what are they conserving? They're conserving something. They want a freeze of a particular time of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Whereas liberals say, okay, we're going to liberate our thinking. Or progressives think forward. Well, what is the opposite of progressive is regressive, which is looking backward.
Which is peer pressure from dead people.
Exactly.
It's good way to explain that, though, Derrick.
Yeah. And Jeanette says, I had a conversation today with some coworkers about communal living of our ancestors and how society has moved from that form, that instead of helping one another, we compete. And let me say this.
Boy, that's powerful.
It is. And this is a true story. My grandparents, when they left Alabama and came to Detroit, they owned a house in Alabama and they mortgaged that house to buy a house in Detroit. And that house that they bought was what they called a 2-family flat. So you have one family upstairs and one family downstairs. It's like a duplex, but we call it a 2-family flat because that's Detroit. And so my grandparents lived upstairs, and anybody who was coming up from Alabama lived downstairs, and they would stay there until they basically got their shit together, got on their feet, and then they were able to move out. And so that was that was communal living. And my grandparents, they didn't charge people exorbitant amounts of money. It was just like, hey, just kick me a few dollars, get your shit together, and then get you a house.
My dog's unhappy about something.
Yeah, sounds like your dog's pissed off.
Yeah.
Ben Urban says, hell is other people on social media.
Oh, God, Ben.
And then he goes on to say, a genuine utopia is founded on a universal pursuit of cosmic ecumenism. That is actually kind of deep, Ben.
Yeah, it is. That's interesting. I have to think about that for a minute.
And Jeanette says she loves Star Trek. I know that there's a reason why I love you, Jeanette.
Yeah, I knew she was a Trekkie. I knew when you were talking about it, I thought Jeanette's going to like that.
And then Larry Harris says, anything beyond basic services, you're responsible for payment. That's the way things are, but that's not the way things should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, it's crazy. I could go on about that all night.
Come on, guys. Somebody chime in. You can join in by clicking the link, and you can be part of this discussion. You can be online. Oh, Steve Clausen said the empty chair of Passover is being habituated. Elijah is about to be revealed. I don't know what that means, Steve.
I don't either.
But it sounds funny as fuck to me right now. Brittany says due process. This is a good one. Sandra says, too bad nature doesn't purge those who refuse to govern themselves. This is probably the wine talking for me tonight. No, that's not the wine, Sandra. You're on. You're on. I mean, what if nature just kind of handled things? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's see.
It is, it is interesting the time in which we live. I mean, if you look back, was there ever really a good time?
No,
I mean,
but
seriously,
let me say this about that, right? MAGA, make America great again. Honestly, Aaron, you just said it. When was America great?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Because they need to have it handed to them. Like, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, but society as a whole, or humanity, I mean, you look back through history, you think about it's a history of genocides and oppression and poverty and the haves and the have-nots, right? Like pick a time in history.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like, yeah, it was great in your imagination because, you watched Happy Days and Leave It to Beaver and whatever else you watched.
Yeah. But you know what? I always think about All in the Family, right?
Yeah.
The theme song, the opening theme, when Archie and Edith are singing that song, those were the days.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody's pining for this way that things used to be, but the thing is, the way things used to be didn't even benefit you. Listen,
no,
if you're a white person and you're not in the upper class, see, this is the thing, that I'm going to say something here. Here's a history lesson that prior to, say, like 1700, there was no real construct of race in this country.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
It was like you had black indentured servants and you had white indentured servants, and there wasn't, you had some slaves, but that was slavery was an institution, but you have free blacks and you have free whites. But there in I think this was like around 1800 that there was a revolt of indentured servants and slaves that was participated in by both blacks and whites.
Right.
And so the powers that be had to make an appeal to the whites and say, hey, listen, the good news is you're not black. That's the good news. So here's the deal. If you work hard and apply yourself, maybe you can have some slaves someday, right? And because the society is the way the society is structured, you're always going to be better than and all of this. And so what they did is they used this mind fuck in order to influence white people to be against black people, and where prior to that they were all kind of united.
Yeah. But my point is, like, we've never seen a time. I mean, think about this, Derrick. This is mind blowing to me. Why is it in our lifetimes that there's been more progress in technology and communication and connecting the world than in any other time in human history?
Yeah.
Like, this is a moment. So, like, to encourage people, like, this is a moment, man. I mean, like, we are living in the most incredible time ever when you think about it.
But if you look at it, there are a lot of people that are opposed to this, right? Because, you know, and I'm writing in my sequel to Deconstructing Religion, I'm writing about this, is that how the Bible included its own safety valves, right? Because it said that in the latter days, knowledge would increase, and that, you know, people would become lovers of their own, all this other stuff. And basically what they're doing, the people that wrote this knew that society is going to increase in understanding. They knew it. And so you got to put something in here that keeps everybody in the fold when that happens. Listen, Google is your fucking friend. You know, you have the ability to find out what is really going on if you dig, if you're willing to do the work.
Right.
And if you do this, you'll find out that a lot of what we've been told is bullshit, that a lot of what is accepted as fact is bullshit. And that bullshit runs rampant. That basically this is a country that was founded on lies and profits on bullshit. You write that down. You know, and so now you're able to see what the lies are, what the bullshit is. It's like, I got to bring this in. The Bible. And so when I talk about Bible, I always spell Bible Buybull, because you buy bull, right? That's how I spell Bible, because the idea is that, you know, if you succumb to that, you buy into that bullshit. And if that's the end of your thinking, then you're basically stuck. But if you go beyond that and you look at how was scripture canonized, how was it written, how do we come about the 66 book canon, you know, which for the Catholic Church it's 80 books, and for the Orthodox Church it's 82. How do we come to these books? How do we make this decision? And I humbly submit to you that we came to this conclusion because these are the things that are needed to keep society under control.
Interesting.
So now you have Google. You can look at this. You can look at what happened in the Council of Nicaea. You can look at Constantine and what why he even convened the council, and you can look at Eusebius and why he was chosen to lead the convocation. And you can look at all these things, and when you look at it objectively, if you set aside your confirmation bias, you'll find out this is really fucked up, y'all. And then you move on, and you realize, okay, this is all bullshit, and there's no way that any rational thinking being should place their belief paradigm in any of this, right? But here's, and then again, like like critical race theory, and critical race theory is not taught anywhere outside of law schools. That you know,
because it's a legal theory, by the way.
It's a legal theory, right?
It's not a historical theory necessarily. It's a legal theory. I'm just throwing that out there for people to clarify.
That's absolutely right, Aaron. And the thing is that if your child is learning critical race theory, that means they're in law school.
They're in law school. Yeah,
fucking congratulations. You did something right. But
Sorry to interrupt there.
no,
but
no, no. It's like
if you watch Fox News, you don't know that.
no, you don't. But did you hear about this? This was funny. Some think tank paid people who were Fox News watchers to watch CNN for 30 days.
Oh my God.
And these people came up with an entirely different thinking paradigm.
Of course they did.
And I'm not saying the CNN is great. I really believe, you know, I think that when I'm consuming news as a product, I consume news from at least 8 different sources a day.
You have to today. You have to.
And I'm not looking for confirmation bias to try to bolster what I believe. I just want to take I want the information as raw data, and then I will process it as I see fit.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to make a comment. I can't remember. I lost it. I think it was Brittany, but if I'm attributing it to the wrong person, I apologize. Something about, history is repressed. I would nuance that just a little bit. I would say in general chunks, big chunks of information, history is not repressed. I know that Native Americans were butchered and I know in the town that I live, Pueblo, Colorado, it was first founded as a fort. But before that, it was, I can't remember which tribe of Native Americans it was, but I know that the American soldiers gave them blankets as a testament of goodwill, as a peace offering, as whatever. Here we are to help you. Here we are to save you. They gave them blankets. They gave them clothing infected with smallpox.
Yeah.
And completely wiped them out. I know that. I know that just 30 miles down the road, there was or however far it is, whatever, there was the Sand Creek Massacre. I know that African Americans were enslaved and mistreated horribly to build the economy of the South. I know about the Civil War. I may not know the nuances of history.
Don't forget about Chinese immigrants in the railroad.
Yeah, or the Japanese internment camps during World War II. There's one just down the road from us. And we have neighbors, our next door neighbor, whose grandparents were kept in the internment camps. And one of the things we learned from her was that everything was taken away from them, their businesses, their belongings, everything. They were put in the internment camps. And then when the war was over, they were just let go with no reparations whatsoever.
Nothing.
I mean, I know that stuff. So I don't know if it's suppressed as much as we just, frankly, if I can be honest, the vast majority of people just frankly don't give a fuck. They know about it, but they don't give a fuck. And that's the problem. That's the problem.
No, it is the problem. But here's the thing is that, again, I'm the eternal optimist, as are you, Aaron. I really believe that if we
thanks for reminding me,
man, if you put these things up front and say, listen, let's just deal with this. And again, I'm going to use myself as an example. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Okay. If I was never diagnosed with it, I would have never known. Right. And it would have gone on. But because I found out what the diagnosis was, what the treatment plan was, went through with the treatment plan, I am now cancer free.
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem is that we know that there are things that, man, Condoleezza Rice, of all people, she said that America's birth defect was racism.
Yeah.
I'll use myself as an example for that, because I was born with a birth defect, what was called a club foot, right? That where your foot is kind of like this. So the doctors told my parents, hey, listen, if we break your kid's foot and reset it, then your kid will have a normal life. And so I did. I was able to play with other kids. I was able to play sports. I was able to be on active duty military. I was able to be a spec ops, all of these things, right? If I didn't have that diagnosis and the treatment, I would have never experienced everything I did. In other words, if we don't deal with these things, if we don't deal with the dystopian aspects of this country, and at least be willing to acknowledge that we are on the dystopian slope. If we don't acknowledge that, we can never change. We can never fix it. Can never get right.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think what I meant by that, like, we don't give a fuck, is like, we have to start caring again, and we have to something else. I think it was Brittany that said, Black people have had difficulty acquiring wealth because of it's not generational. And I can relate to that. I mean, certainly, I was born into privilege. I was.
Yep.
And and I was taught things, something people don't realize about privilege. I was taught about credit, Derrick. Yep. I was taught about equity.
I wasn't.
And no, I know. And those are like some of the missing pieces, how wealth is perpetuated. And the whole university system originally was designed. That's why, education is socialist from K through 12, because that educates your laborers. And we want to have educated, competent laborers, but then you had to pay tuition to go to college. That was designed to perpetuate the classes.
Yeah.
It's kind of changing a little bit, but I lost my train of thought again. I've had too much wine. I'm done. I'm maxed out. I forgot where I was going with that. Anyway.
No, but you're right.
I know what I was going to say.
Go ahead.
Okay. We have to think. I think we have to think generationally. Like when you were talking about Elon Musk, and you were talking about Bill Gates, and you were talking about that, I'm processing that to myself. And instead of thinking to myself, and this is where our attitudes are so important, right? Like if we have these negative attitudes that are clinging to the past, or frustrated with our present, but if we're hopeful and we're optimistic, when you're talking about that, I could have been thinking, well, I sure got fucked. Well, I sure didn't have anything. Well, I didn't have anybody to believe in me. I didn't have anybody who believed in me in ministry. I didn't have anybody to fund me. We made what we did off of people that were making average wages, and their whatever they gave in the offering plate. I didn't have somebody, hey, we'll buy you a building because we believe in what you're doing. We'll invest $300,000 in what I could have been thinking that, but instead I was thinking, what do I need to do right now? What do I need to do right now to set my children up, to set their children up?
Yeah.
So that progressively, as a family, we can improve. We can get better. And I think we need to be able to think generationally. I think we need to be able to think not just about ourselves. I mean, honestly, that motivates me, dude. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? What do I need to do to create a financial foundation, to create the highest ceiling I possibly can? And you've talked about this, Derrick, and I don't know if you've talked about it here, but I'll hit you one back.
Go ahead, man.
We've talked about this privately in conversations, that you were a single parent household in Detroit, barely making it.
Yep.
And now, live in a beautiful home with a swimming pool and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, your ceiling becomes the floor upon which your children build.
Exactly.
And so I think one of the key things that we have to do if we want to bring about real transformation is we have to think bigger, and we have to think generationally, and we have to think, okay, what can I do right now that's going to make a difference so that my kids have a better starting point, so that I create a higher ceiling than what my floor was, so that my kids can start there, and then teach them and equip them, teach them about credit, teach them about the way, to the best of your knowledge, the way the world works, so that you not only equip them financially, but you equip them with the wisdom that you gained over 40, 50, 60, 70 years of life. Even if you think they're not listening, talk to them anyway. More is getting through to them than you think, and prepare a floor for them that's higher than anything that you could have started with. And that's the way we can make a real difference. So, all right, I'm off my soapbox for the night. I'm done.
And I'm all with you. And I'm going to say a couple of things, like, that, like my sons all have investment accounts. right?
My,
And my two youngest ones, they have taken theirs and they're self-directed, and they've out earned their older brothers,
that's cool.
because they actually pay attention to this, and they're doing it. But there are two things. Like, one is that I have three sons that are, well, actually I have four now, because Ducey is legally an adult. But they all have good credit. Like Ducey and Anthony, I made them authorized users on my credit, right? So when they actually get out to start credit on their own, they're going to start off with like 650, 700 credit coming out the gate, right? And my two oldest sons have better credit than I do. True story,
Yeah.
So the thing is that you have to do things, and speaking in terms of the topic, right? Utopia versus dystopia. I'm teaching them that you can have utopia if you choose to have utopia. Say hi, Smokey.
Hey, Smokey. What kind of cat is that? Do you know?
He's a Russian blue mutt, right?
Man.
That he's at least 40% Russian blue, and then he's some other stuff, but that
right. I thought it might be blue Burmese.
No, he's a Russian blue mostly.
All right. Anyway, sorry.
But that's my dude.
Dude, I gotta go.
Okay. No problem, man.
I gotta check out, man. This was great, though. John Knight says, I have to disagree with the statement regarding we have to start caring again. This country hasn't cared since the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria landed and encountered the natives, or they would still be on the lands they originally were. Ooh. More of them would still exist. Same with blacks, Chinese, and others. No, yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
Can't argue with that.
John. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get John on here one day too. John is
For sure.
he's a former member of our church family, and he's still part of my family. But John's a really very, very intelligent, educated, and well-versed guy. I think he'd be a fantastic guest.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Ben says, great stuff tonight, guys. I'll start brainstorming for next week. Yeah, next week, the one, the only, the amazing Ben Urban.
Yep.
You guys have read his stuff or encountered him, you're in for a treat.
So, Aaron, you go ahead and close us out, man, and because I love it when you say it, man.
All right, but I love you. I love everybody that's watching, and peace and hair grease.
Goddamn right. Peace and hair grease, y'all.